just keep iterating your last attempt.
Exactly.
In the book, Mind Management, not Time Management, you talked about clock time versus event time. That's a nice example that you had there, because I understand that it is so different here in North America, and you talked about your experience in Colombia. Can you speak to that? Do you implement that in your life right now, where you are much more relaxed and you are somewhat on an event time, not clock time?
It's funny. I've been living here for a while, and yeah, I do realize every once in a while, like, gosh, I'm really on event time. How can I get back some of that urgency that I had sometimes? So there was this social psychologist, Robert Levine, and he went around looking at different cultures and found that people have two different orientations toward time. They're either on a clock time or they're on an event time. And clock time is this idea that things need to be done by certain times. Like, this meeting is over at such and such time, lunch is at such and such time. Or the people are on event time. They're more motivated by, they're looking at arriving at some kind of event. We're doing this meeting and it's over, when we do the thing that we decided to meet for. Or lunch is going to be when I'm hungry, and it's really amazing you don't really appreciate it until you actually operate in a culture that is on a completely different time orientation, that is on that event time. Like, it just wouldn't even occur to them to think like, oh, that's a 2-hour bus ride. Like, forget it. I'm just not even going to bother. It's like, okay, I'll get on the bus and I'll do other stuff while I'm on the bus, and it's fine. Like, I'll get there. Whereas, just when you're in North America, when you're in that North American culture, really just constantly obsessed with how long is something taking, and it just results in this sense of impatience. And it's one of these things that really is at odds with creative work in a way. Like, it can be useful to sit down with a timer for 5 minutes and say, okay, you're going to brainstorm a bunch of ideas and sort of force yourself to do that sort of thing. But when you want to be open to new opportunities and such, which is part of what it means to be creative, you've got to have that sort of relaxed pace to things, where you aren't really like looking at the clock all the time, making sure that you're filling it with something. Because that's what time management is. That's really like the foundation of time management, is this idea that you have a certain amount of time and you're going to fill your time with certain actions. And based upon the amount of time that you've invested, you're going to get this predictable output. Well, creative work doesn't work that way. That works fine for stacking bricks or, moving chunks of iron in the yard of Bethlehem Steel or wherever Frederick Taylor was standing there with a stopwatch, timing workers, trying to get them to do. Like, you can have a valuable idea, or you can have an idea that's not valuable, and it's neither of them really take time necessarily. It's just this moment in your mind. But there's all this empty space that has to happen around it to prepare your mind for that moment. And there's been some research about clock time and event time, where they have purposefully put people in the clock time or event time orientation. Because, by the way, yes, cultures might tend to have a clock time or event time orientation, and people might tend to have a clock time or event time orientation, but we switch a little bit based upon the context. But when they put people in that clock time context, they're more anxious. They are not as open to new opportunities. They're not really able to generate ideas as well. So, whether it's something that I take advantage of, to some extent, when I find myself in when something's going on that's causing me to have a lack of control over time, I try to embrace that as a time to do a little bit more higher level brainstorming to embrace the event time. So for example, if I'm traveling, now I'm not talking about being on vacation, I'm talking about like being in transit. And there's all these times when you're waiting, or there's a delay, or you're forced to be at the airport till 3 a.m. or something because your plane's getting worked on or something. That's when I'll really start to do some of the more higher level brainstorming, because my mind just isn't in the right state to be kind of generating things at that time. Because that's better for like a clock time. Like I've got a schedule I try to keep for different things. I'm like, okay, I've got my newsletter comes out every Monday, for example, and I've got a production schedule for that, and I've got dates those things happen, and I have certain amounts of time that I think stages of that are going to take, and that follows somewhat of a schedule. But if I am in some sort of situation where I'm just not going to have a lot of control over time, I try to embrace that and let myself get into event time and use that as an opportunity to think higher level about things.
That's fair. There's room for both clock time and event time. You just need to realize which one you are in the moment.
You want your airlines to be on clock time. You've got a connecting flight that's at 3 p.m. You want to arrive at 2 so you can get on the flight.
Yeah.
You hope that they're on clock time. But if you're trying to come up with a new marketing plan for the next quarter, then it might help to spend an afternoon on clock time and really get some more creative brainstorming going that way.
Right. Do you think, in terms of event time, is that related to what thinking mode you get into? Let's say you talk about divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Do you think event time is meant for divergent thinking, where it's all open, and then when it's time to sit down and really get the work done, that's when you converge into it? Do you think
Absolutely.
they are two related?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just on a neurobiological level, like if you aren't thinking about a goal and having like a target task to be done by a target time, your brain activity is going to be a little bit more diffuse, and that is consistent with divergent thinking. Is that different ideas that you have in different regions of your brain are able to sort of talk to one another and combine with one another and maybe turn into valuable insights. But if you are in what's called a vigilant state of mind, where if you have a goal that you're trying to reach and there's great consequences for not reaching it by some given amount of time, all your mental resources are going to be focused on trying to achieve that.
Right.
And so that is going to be better for like a convergent type of thinking, whereas the opposite of that is going to be better for the divergent type of thinking.